Our next guest is Dr. Nandini Chatterjee Singh, PhD, Cognitive Neuroscientist, National Brain Research Center on deputation to UNESCO. I would please request Dr. Nandini to come on stage and speak to us on shaping the biliterate brain, acquisition of literary skills in 2 distinct languages.
Thank you very much to Square Panda, especially Ashish and Andy, for this opportunity to talk to you. A little bit about the research that I do on the reading brain. Okay? So what I'm trying to share with you today is, I hope it doesn't turn you off, is a more data-based approach into trying to understand how the brain learns to read. And unlike everywhere else in the world, in India, we do everything differently. So even in India, too, we are the only country in the world that exposes our children to learning to read 2 distinct writing systems. Okay? And that's a very unique challenge that the brain has to deal with, and I will share some data about that today. My primary appointment is at the National Brain Research Center, and I'm currently on deputation with UNESCO MGIP, which is the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development, where I'm working with them to develop a new curriculum for socio-emotional learning using a lot of interactive technology, again, using neuroscience as a basis. So we're trying to develop both intellectual and emotional intelligence in school children, and the idea being that education probably needs a rethink now and needs to focus on building, in addition to literacy and numeracy, mindfulness, empathy, and compassion. So that's what the structure of the other curriculum is about. But I'm going to talk a little bit about my work on reading in India. Okay. So that's largely what my laboratory at NBRC does, is understand language literacy and music, and look at it very, very specifically in the Indian context, and then try and make an attempt to take what we find in the laboratory into classrooms and into public life. Okay? So largely my focus has been on the learning brain and the emotional brain. And the emotional brain is what we investigate using Indian music. So we use Indian ragas to try and understand different emotions and the labeling of different emotions. And over the years, there's a bunch of research that has gone on to show that it's very important for a child to be emotionally engaged in order to learn anything in the classroom. Okay? If the child is not emotionally happy, learning in the classroom is going to be severely impacted. Okay? So one of the most important findings that neuroscience has come out with in the last 30 years has been the whole notion of neuroplasticity. And that is that the brain changes after learning. Okay? And it is because of this structural and functional change in the brain that we are all able to learn how to read. And that's what I'm going to try and show you today. So this ability of the brain to change is what is the basis of all learning, whether it's music, whether it's learning to read, whether it's learning to behave socially, or do a number of activities that we do in life. And that's the basis of this comes from the ability of the brain to change and form new connections. And what you see up there is how different neurons in the brain actually reconnect to form a new circuit so that new function can be performed. So what makes reading such a big challenge to worry about and to think about? So unlike spoken language, which is something which we are all set up to do, so you leave a child in just human society and that child will learn human language. He will learn how to speak, because there is a region of the brain which many of you probably know of as Broca's area, or which is technically known as the inferior frontal gyrus, which is responsible for language. And there's a much bigger circuit, but that's a very important role of speaking. However, unlike spoken language, reading has to be taught. The brain is not wired to read. Okay? There is no region in your brain which is specifically meant for reading. And therefore, this role of neuroplasticity becomes very important because now you have to teach the brain how to learn to read. So what you need to do is to set up a whole new circuit for reading, and that's what you see on the right, okay? So there are regions in the brain. So there's your frontal lobe is this part of the brain, and your Broca's area sitting inside here. So what you're trying to do when you're learning to read is taking sounds of the language, which are represented in your auditory cortex sitting above your ears, and mapping it to symbols in the visual cortex, which is sitting at the back, okay? So this forms together to connect up to form a word. So it happens in a very specific sequence. And that's why reading is a circuit. It's not a specific area in the brain. And what you see on the right there is how this reading circuit comes together. So you can imagine that there are a number of components of this circuit that have to be able to function so that reading begins to happen effortlessly. And this effortlessly is what we are trying to also try and understand. Because of the fact that there is neuroplasticity, when the brain does this again and again and again, the brain begins to behave like a muscle. And therefore, today, when you are able to read effortlessly, it's because your brain has mastered how to map these symbols and sounds together. And as a consequence, over a period of time, you might start out as being auditory learners, but you eventually become visual learners. So you see a particular pattern of a word, and you can recognize it immediately, without even going into the auditory part of it. But every time I tell you a new word, like dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, okay, that's a big word. So when you encounter it the first time, you will probably break it down and read it in parts. That's again going back to a basic process of learning to read, which is decoding, okay? Now you're doing it in chunks, okay? So essentially reading has sort of three basic processes involved, and they are listed on the left. So you have phonology, you have orthography, and you have semantics, okay? And these three, which are often called the triangular model of reading, have to come together in order for a child to learn to read. And therefore, you can appreciate what a challenge it might be for the brain to be able to do that. So much so that, but reading has become such an important part of our lives that over a period of time, as you become a practiced reader, a specific part of your brain, a specific part of your, it's called the inferior temporal gyrus, becomes associated with recognizing letter strings. It's often also called the visual word form area. Okay. So what's interesting is, which I won't talk about today, is but people in India, because they read two writing systems, we actually know that there are two visual word form areas that you find in adult readers who are skilled readers of two writing systems. Okay. So that is one of the most remarkable things which we encountered when we started to research people in India who were reading multiple writing systems. Okay. But this is what the situation in India is like, unlike a large part of the West, where when you travel, you will primarily encounter signboards in one language. But in a number of societies in South Asia, you actually encounter multiple writing systems, and this is a very common sight in India, okay, that you read multiple writing systems. So the big question was, how does the brain learn to read multiple writing systems? What is the best order in which these languages should be taught to children? We don't seem to have any specific, clearly outlined policy on how to be able to do that. Yet our kids are required to learn to do that. So but given the fact that we have people from different parts of the world, it's only fair to tell them how complex the writing system in India is. Okay? So you have at least 20 officially recognized spoken languages, 11 officially recognized scripts, 2 official languages, Hindi and English, and therefore we are a biliterate society. And we have a multiliterate school system, okay? So that's the system that Square Panda is coming to address, okay? So Square Panda needs to know what's the challenge out there in society, okay? So let me tell you a little bit about the Indian writing system, and then we can do a comparison with the Roman writing system, which is English. Okay? So I'm using Devanagari or Hindi, which is used as an example to talk about one writing system in India. And so this has now begun to be called the Akshara-based writing system, but it's primarily also started out as being called an alpha syllabary. So writing systems that have vowels and consonants are alphabetic in nature. So English has that, and so does Hindi or Devanagari. Okay? But the sound, the underlying sound, is a syllable. Okay? So you have ka, ma, la. Okay? That's ka halant plus a. But in English, you have ka, ma, la. Okay? The a sound at the end is not there. So that's the difference between a phoneme and a syllable. Okay? The basic unit, therefore, are aksharas. And one of the challenges that we have is, you can see that they are fairly complex in terms of structure. There is, unlike English, which is primarily read left to right, in Indian writing systems, you also have to read above and below. So they are fairly non-linear scripts. And then there is this issue of articulatory sequencing. Okay? So focus on the last word over here, which is kill. Okay? So that's an E sound, which you encounter first, but your brain knows that the E, by saying it, comes later. Okay? So you need to be aware of this fact when you're reading Hindi. Okay? So these are some of the challenges of Indian writing systems. I'm covering them very quickly. So they are visual-spatially complex, but they're extremely transparent. Okay? You don't have the B-O-U-G-H, C-O-U-G-H problem in Hindi as you have in English. So B-O-U-G-H is bow and C-O-U-G-H is cough. Okay? So you have to remember that these are different. But in Hindi, as long as you are able to read your aksharas and the rules that combine them, you are able to read virtually anything in Hindi. So this whole issue, which we will tackle in a few minutes about word and non-word reading in Indian languages, is actually much simpler. Okay? You can actually read any new word just as easily as you read a familiar word in Indian languages. Okay? So given this, another quick primer is, so written up there are the consonants of Devanagari. Written below that are the vowels. Okay? But when the vowels combine with the consonants, they're called diacritics, they assume a very different form. So when you teach children to read in Indian languages, you have to teach them also that these vowels, when expressed explicitly, look very different from when they are combined with the consonant. So what I want you to recognize is where English might have challenges of orthography, which is the way sounds map to letters. In Indian languages, you have the challenge of visual complexity, which I'm sorry to say we have not paid enough focus on. Okay? We don't even have a clear basis on how these should be introduced into classrooms. And as a consequence, over the past few years, we've begun to find that children actually take longer to read Indian languages than they learn to read English because of the challenges that these writing systems pose for them. A very similar situation is seen, for instance, in Chinese. And kids are known to master Chinese only by the time they are 13 and 14. Then why do we expect kids in India to have mastered Hindi by the time they are 8, 9, and 10? Okay? It's a question that probably we need to begin to ask ourselves. Okay? So here's a comparison where I've tried to sort of put across the challenges of reading English versus Devanagari or even Indian writing systems is the number of aksharas, or the number of letters that you need to use, is very large. The sound symbol mapping or the rules of orthography are different, very, very transparent in one, more difficult in English, but the consonant letters and the vowel letters sound very similar to the way they are written. Writing in both is left to right, is linear, but you have this additional challenge of visuospatial complexity. Okay? So given that, now let's come to the school education system in India. Okay? So it's a researcher's dream, and a nightmare because of the complexity in the way the whole system is implemented. Okay? So you have a 3 or a 2 language formula. So you have to learn to read certainly English and Hindi, and possibly the state language also. For example, in Maharashtra or in Bombay, you also have to learn to read Marathi. The advantage being that Hindi and Marathi both come from Devanagari. So there's a common writing system there. But imagine if you had to read English, Hindi, and Telugu. So you had to have 3 writing systems to learn to read. Okay? On top of that, this exposition could be simultaneous or sequential in nature. So with this background, can somebody pass me a bottle of water, please? Here is some research that I will quickly share. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to quickly walk you through 2 research studies that we've conducted. One will talk about the behavior and the functional imaging of kids learning to read 2 writing systems. And the second will discuss a little bit, it's a study in progress, on order of acquisition. How important is it when you are exposing a child to reading 2 writing systems in different scenarios? Okay. So this is the first study that we did a couple of years ago. It had children from the same school in Delhi. I'm based primarily in Delhi, Gurgaon. And they are children between the ages of 8 and 10 years. Okay? So they're from classes 3 to 5. All of them come from Hindi-speaking homes. Okay? So their primary or their native language is Hindi, and therefore the immediate writing system you would think of is Devanagari. But they go to English medium schools. Okay? So to tell you quickly what are English medium schools, where the instruction happens in English. So children get about 6 to 7 hours of instruction in English. Hindi, or the native language, is a subject in school. So you might get about 4 hours in a week, maybe. But the language in the playground is Hindi. Okay? That's what the kids are used to talking to each other. Okay? So if you come to such a school, it's quite likely that you don't speak English, but you are learning to read in English. So the only way of learning to read a language is recognizing the patterns of the letters and the sounds. So I'm afraid the only thing the child can do at that age is rote, because they don't have a vocabulary yet. Okay? The vocabulary acquisition is happening as that language is being learned. Okay? And children are fast learners, so they pick up words even from conversations. But you and I both know that the mode of this being taught in the classroom can vary immensely. Okay? You can be taught English through Marathi. You can be taught English through Hindi. Okay? So the communication might happen in a very different language. Okay? So we did three kinds of studies with such kids. We came up with a battery of tasks. Okay? So one of the admissions I have over here is, I am not a trained cognitive neuroscientist. I'm actually a trained physicist. I went on to study the brain and neuroscience when I began to study songbird learning at UC Berkeley. Okay? And I went there to study because I was looking at helping them understand patterns of neural activity that they were getting in from birds. Okay? But birds learn to sing very similar to the way humans learn how to speak. And that's how I got interested in how the brain learns different languages, and then came back to India and started a laboratory where I began to do this. And the Institute acquired an MRI scanner. And so because this is the age of out-of-box thinking, I said, so what? I'll begin to learn cognitive neuroscience as an associate professor, and that's how I got into this, okay? So a lot of this is kind of out-of-the-box, bottom-up thinking that's happened. And so we realized, so a lot of my learning, therefore, came from research papers that I was studying. And I realized that people were looking at the fact that in order to be able to learn to read, you want to have a good knowledge of the phonology of the language, the sounds that the language has, okay? So you need to have a task to assess phonological processing, okay? Can you differentiate between different sounds, okay? Then how well can you recognize letters? Because the next thing is mapping letters to sounds and then putting them together, okay? So we came up with different tasks. And finally, we created a battery of 9 tasks, okay? So for oral language, we looked at rapid naming, is how quickly can you name objects. These are just pictures of objects, okay? then how good is your vocabulary? So can you sort of say, if you ask a child to say, how many objects can you name in this room? It's a measure of how many names of objects can he or she associate with. And then you can have a verbal fluency task where you tell a child, you give the sound of any letter, you can give any sound and say la or pa, and how many words can you name? The fun thing about tasks like this is they are independent of writing systems. For the first set of tasks, the child doesn't need to have any exposure to reading or writing. Please do recognize that. So this is all at pre-KG level, as people often call it. Okay? Then in order to be able to rhyme and to be able to play around with syllables and phonemes, again, you primarily need a knowledge of sounds. Okay? So if you go back and think about all those different rhymes that your grandmother probably taught you about tongue twisters, they come in very handy here because they teach you about how you can play with sounds. So the first two sets, which are 6 tasks, require no knowledge of a writing system or the letters. Okay? But the next, which is the outcome, the literacy tasks, are reading, spelling, and writing, and some non-word reading too. Okay? So that's the set of tasks we set out to do with kids from classes 3, 4, 5. And so on the left, you have naming, phonological awareness, that is rhyming and playing around with sounds, fluency, and then reading. To tell you very quickly, the skills across both languages in the kids in the school were fairly well matched. Okay? It's not that they were doing very badly in English just because it was a second language. So you can see how quickly they've picked up. Okay? But there's a little difference here. Okay? So they're doing better in the phonology of Hindi because it's their native language. They're doing better in the fluency because they're having more exposure to English. Okay? And then when you look at reading, you can see some differences. Okay? So they're actually reading words and non-words just as well in Hindi, but in English, there's a big effect there. Okay? These are the correlations across the two languages, and you can see that, and this is what I want you to certainly take away with. Kids who are doing well in their native language are almost certainly doing well in the second language. This is the first time I will show this, and you will see this slide come back again and again, because somewhere I also want to emphasize the fact that it's important for us to build good skills in native languages, in the languages children speak, in order for them to learn a second language. And this has been shown across studies conducted across the world. Okay? So this is a bad slide in terms of numbers and data, but it's an important slide in terms of drawing conclusions from that. And if you just quickly go down column 2 and column 6, which is Hindi word reading and English word reading, what I want you to notice is the fact that kids who are reading well in English show a high correlation with how well they're doing phonology processing in Hindi and how well they're doing non-word reading in Hindi. So non-word reading, non-words are words that are not real words, but they're a combination of letters put together. Okay? And in Hindi, it really doesn't matter, whether that's a meaningful word or no. If you know the letters and the sounds, you can actually put them together. Okay? But no, there is no score of English that correlates reversely with Hindi. So what I want you to emphasize is that learning and acquiring good skills in the native language, the language which the child speaks, plays a very important role in the reading that he or she receives later on, okay? Whether it's the first or the second language. Okay? So building these good phonological skills is something important. Okay? It's even worthwhile playing games around them, even when you're cooking or doing some fun activity at home. Then these kids were put into the MRI scanner, okay? And so one of the things I want to tell you is kids are very happy participating in experiments. Unlike adults, they are a lot more willing to participate in something new. And we actually had no concerns at all about bringing them in. MRIs are completely non-invasive, so you don't have to worry about the child being safe or unsafe. In fact, many of the parents whose kids came into the scanner were also part of these tasks to convince them that it's perfectly all right. And so here's what, when the child is in the scanner and reading words, it sounds like. let's hope this works, and it is not, unfortunately. But I wanted you to get you a little feel on when they're reading these words out. So they're lying in an MRI scanner, there's a screen up there, and then they read the words aloud, okay, as they appear one after the other. So they do a word and non-word reading task. And before that, we also did what is called a structural imaging analysis, okay? So you take sections of the MRI brain pictures that you've taken. It's like you're taking pictures of the brain, and then you do an analysis to try and see that if any of the behavioral skill that you have assessed, does that correlate with some difference in gray matter volume in any part of the brain, okay? And what we were able to find is that there are actually distinct correlates for the syllables and the phonemes, which the brain becomes sensitive to, and the gray matter in these areas specifically changes. Here, it is the putamen, okay? There's a role for the left putamen and the right putamen that shows up very distinctly in these kids. And these are correlated with their phonological skills, how well they're doing in those sound processing tasks. Next, we come into the functional imaging data. So these are the kids, this is what the brain looks like when the children are reading these words, okay? And I'm quickly going to go up there since there's a pointer here. So that's the left hemisphere, that's the right hemisphere. And probably the first thing that you'll notice as you look at this is they look very similar. There's hardly any difference whether they're looking at Hindi or English. So that's the back of the brain, that visual cortex. Okay? This is part of the auditory cortex. And there's your broca zeta. That's your reading circuit coming together, okay, in these kids who are learning to read. And it's almost identical, but unlike a lot of studies from the West that primarily report left hemisphere activity. So reading has been largely ascribed to be a left hemisphere function. But in biliterates, we invariably see involvement of both hemispheres of the brain. Okay? And another factor which might not hit you immediately is but the fact that the right visual cortex participates extensively in learning to read Hindi is because of the fact that these are visually complex scripts. So it's largely believed when the left can't do it, the right comes in to help out. Okay? Then we looked at non-word reading. Okay? And that's what the circuit looks like in non-word reading. And in case you're quickly wondering, how does this compare with word reading? That's how it looks with word reading. Okay? So in Hindi, there's almost an immediate, you can almost map it that the circuits look very, very similar. There are subtle differences in English, which I'm not getting into right now. But you can actually do fine-grained analysis, and that's been shown in this paper, is how even by age 10, the brain is already sensitive to the fact that the orthographies, the fact that Hindi is more transparent and English is not so transparent, is more deep, begins to show up in the way different regions of the brain are activated when they're performing these tasks. So the simple takeaway from this study was that similar circuits for both word and non-word reading for both languages. So therefore, kids who are doing well in one are also doing well in the other. And both hemispheres participate in setting up these reading circuits. Okay? So now let me come to the next study that is currently under progress. And that's a longitudinal study. So we're actually following up a bunch of kids from class 3 to class 5. And now they're in class 6. Okay? And trying to compare the two different scenarios. So they come from two different schools in how this language is being taught to them. Okay? So that's the Indian biliteracy problem that we have. Okay? So you have an oral language at home, which could be whatever your mother tongue or whatever language is being spoken. And then you come to school and you have to learn to read in another tongue, which I call the other tongue. This could happen in two possible ways. Okay? So one is that you come to school and you just provided print exposure to the second language. A second way to do that would be, we first build vocabulary and phonological awareness in the second language, and then begin print exposure in the second language. Okay? So this is a two-step process that's happening. You're first making the child familiar with the language. So you don't start learning to read right away as you come to school, but you just start learning to speak the language, okay? So you are trying to build an element of immersion in terms of becoming familiar with the language, because then you can build on this phonology to be able to teach reading, okay? And you can continue having the child learn to read in the language he already speaks, okay? So I'm going to call them School 1 and School 2 right now. And so medium of instruction, and the first one is English, the second is Hindi. Classes 3, 4, 5, and these are roughly the kids who are having about 50 kids from each class. So all the kids come from native language Hindi backgrounds. In one, they're exposed to 6 hours of English a day, 1 hour of Hindi. In the other, they're exposed to primarily Hindi, 1 hour of English. Okay? This continues up to class 5. And after class 6, both schools get all instruction in English primarily. Okay. So those are some details out there. And we had 10 tasks in each language which we looked at these kids. Okay. So again, the task that I described earlier, but we also added another task that is on morpheme identification to try to get a measure of orthographic processing, okay, because of the challenges that we had talked about in Hindi. And we wanted to bring in a measure of comprehension, because ultimately reading is for meaning. Okay? Reading is not for decoding. The whole process of reading happens so that you can continue to gain information and grow your vocabulary. So it's very important to be able to understand the language. Coming back again to the point of how it's important to be able to bring in children so that they understand the language. So you might have kids who can decode perfectly well, but not understand a word of what they're decoding, which is a complete loss as far as I'm concerned in the process of learning to read. Okay? So these are, again, dirty data slides, but for me, these are what drive messages home. Okay? So classes 3, 4, 5, the mnemonics are sort of out there. So school, this is in English. That's the child learning English. That's the child learning Hindi in that school. And that's school 2. So school, the English school is all green. The Hindi school is all red, okay, if that helps. And the plain bars are all English. The striped bars are all in Hindi. Okay. So as they start out from class 3, 4, 5, you will very quickly notice by class 5, actually, the second school, where their primary language of instruction was Hindi, is actually even doing better than the first school by the time they reach class 5. So these people have started out late in terms of acquisition of English, but have gotten there very quickly. In terms of fluency, yes, the kids initially in the school 1 were doing better. Okay. Now let's get to word reading, orthography, and reading comprehension. Here again, the primary take-home, which I've tried to put down here, is in tasks of phonological analysis, phonological processing, school 2 is doing better than school 1 in terms of both English and Hindi. Okay? So that early exposure of setting up good decoding skills in Hindi has transferred to English. Okay? So despite starting out late, you find that school 2 has caught up with school 1 pretty quickly, okay, in terms of looking at significant differences. But how about trying to look at this from a slightly different angle and saying, if I looked at that full class and saw how many of the kids were able to read, say, 80% of the words or 90% of the words, what do these look like? And here you find that if you look at the graphs, they'll quickly tell you that if I look at word reading, yes, by about class 3. So worry right now only about the blues, because the browns are basically 80 to 90%. So there are only about maybe 4% of the kids who are not doing very well in English in the first school. In the second school, it's much bigger, okay? It's 19%. But as they get to class 5, you can see the numbers have almost matched up, okay? So the second school almost matches up with the first school in both languages, okay? But the first school has not yet caught up with the second in terms of Hindi, okay? Again, taking this to Hindi. So by class 5, The school 1 is still lagging behind by about 2%, but the class 5 has almost completely caught up. So this seems like, you know, everybody's doing okay, so what's the big noise about, okay? So we also thought that we were using the same set of tasks, so it's possible that there could be some element of a practice effect. So before we assess the kids in class 6, by now there's a lot of consolidation that's happened, we went ahead and added more words to the word list, added a new passage in the reading comprehension, and added some novel orthography tasks with the idea that now the kids have learned a lot of the basic stuff, and we can quickly see how they're applying it to novel words that they might encounter. And that's when the story gets a little interesting. So this is still work in progress. But if you look at word reading performance, expectedly, the English school, everybody's doing very well. So they've acquired their word reading skills really well in the first school, okay? Hindi, they're still lagging behind by 19%. The school 2, 100% in English, so on par with school 1, and only 4% kids who are yet waiting to catch up in Hindi in word reading. Orthography performance shows a big difference. Kids in school 2, only about 7% are lagging behind, but the lag in school 1 is quite significant. Okay. This was dictation that we added on. But this was what was the real clincher, which has really made us sit up and think about this more carefully. If you look at reading comprehension in class 6, in English you find the school 2 kids, so this whole red are the kids, this is a difficult passage. There are about 74% kids who are not up to par, but there are 26% kids in school 2. These are the kids who started out late. But if you look at the only English school, that much reading comprehension has still not happened. And you can see that there's a big lag that's happening over here. Okay? So the effects of focusing on a good basic structure of language, understanding, building vocabulary, begins to show up a little later. Okay? It might not manifest early on in classes 2, 3, 4, but we find as kids get older, the effects might begin to show up more gradually. Okay? So we're looking at some more tasks on creative writing, where they use more vocabulary to be able to gauge that, to be able to try and make a case as to why it might be worthwhile for children to build good language skills first before they get on to learning to read. So building a good phonology, building a good vocabulary is important before you start getting exposed to learning to read, rather than just using learning to read as the means to begin to teach the language. And that, I think, is something which the world of reading literature has actually known for a long time. If you go across Europe, which is also very bilingual, they use the same writing system as English, so the writing systems are similar. But they focus on first building a language structure, or first building a phonology, and then adding on the language to it. And that manifests when language development really has to come out in terms of expression and building. Okay. So I'm going to stop here and quickly summarize the findings. The fact that working with native language shows clear gains. It's a little slower, but it manifests well. Building on the phonology of the language first before introducing reading seems to really have an impact. And the fact that Hindi has a transparent orthography teaches the skills of decoding very quickly to children. And that early decoding transfers on to English also. Okay. So these are the two young girls who've played an important role in doing this analysis. And finally, before I end, something that has been very dear to me, which from this knowledge we went on to develop, was the fact that when you're identifying children who might have learning problems in learning to read, okay, it's very important that they be assessed in the native language and English. Dyslexia does not manifest only in English. It's a neurobiological basis for it, and therefore it must manifest in both languages. And so we developed a screening and assessment tool, but this is now freely available for school teachers to use for kids in classes 1 to 5. Okay, it's available on the Android platform. It's called the DALI Screening app, and this is just a little glimpse on what it does. Thank you very much. So this is available on the Android store, and if it's a free download. It has a set of 12 questions which the teacher needs to answer, and it grades it, and then you can decide whether the child needs to get more intensive remediation after that or a more detailed assessment. The detailed assessment follows separately. Thank you very much.
Square, square, panda.